section 1.6 is dividing whole numbers. So I always think backwards, like try to just play around with your multiplication tables. My number one thing I say is, guys, you do not have to jump to the right answer right off the bat. So like say 9, for example. You're like, I don't know what times 9 gets me to 72, but I do know that 9 times 5 is 45. Then just keep adding 9s on top of that or whatever you need to do, okay? The point of example 1 is to show you the 3 ways division can be thrown at you, all right? So if you look at this, first of all, it says find each quotient. Quotient is the answer to a division problem. And again, I like to point that out because whenever they say find the quotient and they only give you 2 numbers, you know that you need to divide, and they don't show you the symbols, okay? So, Micah, you'll have time to work on that, okay? So you have the new note packet right there. I promise you at the end of class you will. All right, so this one, I call it the house, the division house, all right? So 72 is being divided by 9. So what's 72 divided by 9? 8. And you put your quotient, your answer, right on top. This one is just the division symbol. 40 divided by 5. That's 8 as well. Is that okay? So you usually just write equals 8 like that. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Fractions are division, okay? So what's 24 divided by 6?
8.
Nope.
Nope. So it's 4.
4, okay. Again, if you're not too sure, do 6 times 2. That's 12. 6 times 3, that's 18. 6 times 4, you know what I mean? Like, do as much scratch work off to the side if you need to. All right, so we do have properties of 1 and 0. We do like division by 1. What do I mean by that? Anytime you take a number and divide by that same number, it's 1. So if you have 8 things, like 8 cookies, and you have 8 kids, each kid gets 1 cookie. You're dividing 8 to 8 things, all right? If you have a number divided by 1, if you have 9 cookies and only 1 kid, how many cookies does that 1 kid get? All 9 of them, okay? So any number divided by 1 will be that number. So notice it's showing you all different methods of doing that. 0 is where it gets tricky, okay? Typically 0 math is easy. Adding 0, subtracting 0, multiplying by 0, that's all easy. Dividing by 0 is half easy, all right? The thing is, if you have 0 in front or inside the house, you're dividing into 0, and that can happen. If you have 0 things and you're giving it to 9 kids, how many cookies does each kid have? 0, right? You have 0. You just have 9 really sad kids, right? Okay. So 0 can be divided by a number, and that answer is always 0. Where it gets tricky is when you divide by 0. So this is 3 divided by 0. This is 3 divided by 0. And this is 3 divided by 0. And that's undefined. So you have to write undefined. Or my math lab will have a box that you can click undefined. So you cannot divide by 0. You can divide into 0. You can take 0 divided by anything, but you cannot divide by 0. So if he's on the bottom or out front, let's make sure I didn't confuse you too much here, okay? And I think how it helps me, like, because I even have to stop and think for a second, is I actually read it out loud. And if I say the words divided by 0, I know it's undefined, okay? But what is this? This is 0 divided by 7. Is that okay?
Yes.
So that is equal to 0. This is 0 divided by 8. Is that okay? That's 0. This is 7 divided by 0. Key word, I just said divided by 0. What do we know we cannot do? Divide by 0, so it's undefined, and you literally just write that word out. What about 0 divided by 14? Can you divide by 14? That's okay, right? Divide by 14 is okay. You just don't want to divide by 0. So when it comes to the test, guys, you are always good about knowing it's either 0 or undefined, but sometimes we flip-flop it. So try to like, even if you just have to memorize, okay, if the zero's out in front or in the house, I'm okay, it's 0, you know, that kind of thing. If you have to memorize some little trick. If the zero's out in front or in the house, it's okay. But when he's in the back like that, he's undefined.
So if he's like outside the house, then it's no.
Right, because that would technically be 3 divided by 0.
Okay.
So you say the words divided by, because whatever's on the outside is what you're dividing by.
That's what always is.
Yeah, because like this is a little bit more obvious and this is a little bit more obvious. It's the house, guys, that's hard to say what's first. Yep. So you'll get practice with that because guess what's on my math lab? Some of those. All right, here it is, guys. I mean, 4th grade. And this is before we even know decimals. Like, we have to be actors and actresses, and we don't even know that decimals exist. Like, remainders exist, all right? So I'm going to try my best to kind of give you tips, because I want you to know, and I can't stress again, you don't have to jump to the right answer right off the bat. If you have to do a couple times tables off to the side to get to your right answer, that's fine, okay? So I gave you the grid to just kind of help you line it up a little bit. But this is 4,908 divided by 6. So what we're dividing by goes outside, and what we're dividing into goes under here. 4,908. Can you guys see that okay? And I left the top row for our quotient. And this is a little bit different. This is one operation where we actually go left to right. Because every other operation we've gone right to left, haven't we? So this is one where we go left to right. So you ask yourself, can 6 go into 4? No. So then you have to look at it not as a 4, but as 49. Can 6 go into 49?
Yes.
Yes. Can it go in perfectly, though?
Yes.
No. So it's price of right rules, right? It's like, how close can we get to the right answer, but without going over? So what is a multiple of 6 that gets us so close to 49 without going over? 40. Did you say 48?
Wait, oh yeah.
6,
48.
right? Because it's not 8 times, yeah, 48. 6 times 8 is 48. So don't you guys agree that 48 is pretty darn close to 49 without going over? Okay. And again, you're like, I don't know about that, but I know 6 times 5 is 30. So over here, guys, and I won't do this one, so we'll have more room. Over here, you can do 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 6 is 30. You know what I mean? Or you have to do repeated addition. Have work over here if you need to have multiples of 6 so you have those to pull off of. Does that make sense? When we get into the bigger numbers, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But anyway, can we all agree that 6 times 8 is 48? Okay. So I'm going to put 8 above the 9 because really 6 went into 49, not 4. Okay. So 6 went into 49, so he went up there. And then what do we put below the 49?
48.
48. So you see how close that you can get into that number without going over. It can go 8 times. And then you take that product, 6 times 8, and you put it under the number you were trying to go into. Do you remember what our next move is after we do that? You subtract, okay? You're like, how far off was I, right? How far off was 49 from 48, guys? 1. Do you remember the next move after that? Drop down the next number, okay?
Added there. You don't
No.
always subtract
Mhm.
another.
It's just going to say, okay, I almost went into it perfectly, but not quite, so how far off was I? So it's subtraction. Drop down the next number. Can 6 go into 10?
No.
It can, but not perfectly, right? How many times can it go? Once, right? Because what's 6 times 2? 12, and that would have bumped us over the 10, right? So it can only go in once. So he's going to go right up here. And what do I put down here? What 1 times 6 is. What's 1 times 6? 6. And then I do subtraction. How far off is 10 from 6? 4. My last move, it's very methodical. After you do subtraction, what do? Bring down the next number. How many times does 6 go into 48? 8 times, and perfectly, right? So we can put an 8 up there. And what's 6 times 8? 48. So how far off were we? We weren't off at all. And we're done. So what does that mean? It means 6 goes into 4,908 818 times. That's a lot.
It should always be a 0 you end with, right?
Or a number less than that, because we might have a remainder. So it's either a 0 because you went in perfectly, or a number less than 6 because you have like extras hanging over, and we'll do that in a second. Guys, can we do C together real quick just to make sure we feel comfortable with that? Try to catch me if there's any point where you're like, where did that number come from, okay? So who's going to be on the outside of the house?
3.
The 3, okay? Then you draw your house and 753. All right. You start with the first number. Can 3 go into 7?
Yes.
It can. 3 times 1 is 3, right? 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. That bumps me over, right? So how many times can 3 go into 7? 2 times.
So you put on top.
You put on top of the 7 because that's the number I went into. Where over here, I went into the 49, so I put it over the 49, the 9 there. All right. Once you get that number up top, then you multiply the divisor by that number. So what was 3 times 2? 6. You put your close number there, right? How close can we get? And then you always subtract. So 7 minus 6 is 1, and you always bring down that next number. 15. Is that all right?
Do you always drop just 1?
I just dropped
at a
1.
time?
You can drop all of them every time if you want. But you'd have to drop all of them
So
every
you
time.
could drop the 3 and it'd be 100.
153, and we eventually get there. But I only just dropped 1 at a time. Does 3 go into 15?
Yes.
Yes. And perfectly how many times?
5.
5. So we'll put a 5 up here because this is where the 15 is, right? And then 3 times 5 is 15, so he goes right here. And I do the subtraction. And then what do I have to do? Drop down the 3. And so, Ellen, if your 3 wasn't up here, he would have been right here, and you would have dropped him down. Or,
I just think that's easier though to go 1 at a time.
yep, it's totally up to you guys. Like I said, don't think my way is the only way. Like, I want to stress that. Like, I'm just trying to show you what I think is the easiest, all right? And then one last thing. Can 3 go into 3? It can perfectly 1 time. So we'll put a 1 up there. And we'll say 3 times 1 is 3. You do the subtraction. 3 minus 3 is 0. So in both this case, A and C, guys, they went in perfectly. So there's no remainder. How can you check these? I'll just show you on this one. Do you have to check? No, but I just want to show you. You take your answer, your quotient, 251, and multiply by your divisor what you divided by. And your answer should be the big guy that you divided into, okay? 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15, so I'll put my 5, carry my 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 753. So I did the right math, okay? That's just, oop, I'm showing you, you guys didn't get to see any of it. There it is, sorry. So what it is 753 matches the 753 that I started with. Let's get into some that have remainders. So I'm going to actually jump down here, okay? Can I tell you these answers if you want to do them later, okay? They are exactly like A through C. There's nothing tricky. You just go 1 at a time, okay? So on A here, guys, on example 4, what do you get? You get 304 as your answer. So if you want to go back later to practice that, you can. I keep like shifting too much, sorry. And then this is 5100. The reason why I want to jump down here is because we start getting remainders. It's something different, okay? And just for time purposes, I want to show you all the different stuff. All right, let's look at A. We'll actually do both of these, okay? What goes on the outside of the house? The 4, right? What you're dividing, this is 939 divided by 4. So what you're dividing by goes on the outside, and what you're dividing into, called the dividend, that goes on the inside. All right? And you start 1 at a time. How many times does 4 go into 9? Twice, right? 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8, okay? So we'll put a 2 up here. It can go in 2 times. What's our close number? 8. So that goes below the 9. Do your subtraction. So 9 minus 8 is 1. Just bring down that 1 next number, 3. So now we're looking at 4 going into 13. It doesn't go in perfectly, but how close can we get? 12. Yes, did you have a question?
Why do we bring down the number?
Because what we're doing is, it's kind of like that same concept with shifting over. We're not really doing 4 into 9, we're doing 4 into 900. And so we did that 200 times. And we're not really doing 4 into 3, it's 4 into 30. So like we have to get to all the other place values is basically what we're trying to do. All right, 4 goes into 13 how many times? 3. What's our close number? 12. Remember, once you get that, and again, if you're like, I have no idea where these girls are getting these answers or whatever, just go over here and do repeated addition. 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. That was 4 3 times, okay? So we'll put 12 right here. You always put your close number below, and you do the subtraction. So 13 minus 12 gets you what, guys? 1. And then you bring down the 9. Can 4 go into 19 perfectly? No. We already know 4 times 3 is 12, right? 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. We've jumped over at that point, right? So what do we need to do? 4 times 4. So we'll put 4 up there, and we'll put our close number 16 down here. And you do the subtraction. 19 minus 16 is only off by 3. So this kind of goes with what Ellen asked. It won't always be a 0. If it's a 0, that just means it went in perfectly. If it's not a 0, it should be a number less than 4, because it means 4 can't go in anymore, right? So if we do the math and we have a 5, we've done something wrong, because 4 could have gone in one more time. So this is where it's just old school, and you just write R3. Do you guys remember doing that way back when? It goes in equally 234 times with a remainder of 3. How does my math lab have it? It'll have a box, an R, and a box like that. So you'll type 234 and then 3. Like you don't have to type the R there. Is that okay? Do you guys want to try B real quick? Okay, let's do this. So what are we dividing by? 5. Who are we dividing into? 3,287. It's big. And I know, I know you guys don't think this way, but I'm so, like, enthusiastic. Like, once you get done, you're like, holy moly, I just did that math, and I didn't touch a calculator. Like, we got 939 divided by 4. Are you kidding me? We just did that without a calculator. All right, can 5 go into 3? No. So instead of looking at 3, we have to look at the number 32. And so when we get our answer, it's going to go over the 2 because we're looking at that 2-digit number, all right? How close can you get to 32 with a multiple of 5 without going over? 6, right? Because 30 will get us there. Again, you're like, I don't know how these people are counting. Try 5 times 5. You're like, oh, that's 25. I can get a little bit closer. Let's add another 5. That's 5 times 6. That gets me to 30. So the 6 will go over the 2. We'll put the close number 30 right below it, and we'll do the subtraction. 2 minus 0 is 2. 3 minus 3, I'm not going to even worry about it, right? And my next move, guys, is to bring that 8 down, so now I can think about going into 28. 5 cannot go into 28 perfectly, but what's the close? What do you say? 4 times? So 4 times 5 is 20, but we can get closer, right? 5 times, because that'll get us 2. But, Devin, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You try it, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, crap, I can get closer. So then you try it with 5, right? So it can go in 5 times, because 5 times 5 is 25. Is that all right? You do your subtraction. 28 minus 25 gives you 3. Bring down your 7. As I was going to say, we already know 5 times 5 is 25. We already know 5 times 6 is 30, right? So one more 5, 5 times 7 gets us 35. So kind of look at what you've already done, because a lot of times that will get you closer. So it will be 7, and we'll have 35. So what does our remainder end up being, guys? 2. So we just did that, guys. 3,287 divided by 5 is 657 with a remainder of 2.